Oh hey, what's happening there YouTube? It's Brian House here for House Made, and today in this video we are going to be building the new Generation 5 Revolution 2x72 belt grinder. Now this is more of a companion piece to those who bought the kit from my website housemade.us. So if you're looking to build or own a 2x72 belt grinder, my website has all the pieces, parts, and plans that you'll ever need to build a super heavy-duty industrial grinding machine. We've been developing this over the last 4 years now, and the design just gets better and better. And in fact, in Generation 5, it just gets easier to build, and the machine is just that much more functional. Let's get started. All right, so this is the contents of the kit. This is all the pieces of steel, nuts, bolts, hardware, handles, everything you need to build the Generation 5 Revolution 2x72. The only thing that isn't included is the wheels, motor, and VFD. Now, we are making our own wheels right here in Florida. It's out of aircraft grade aluminum, 6061 aluminum. You can add those to your cart and get a discount on the kit. As far as motors and VFDs go, we do not sell those, but we have an awesome resources page where you can go see all of your options, and there's multiple videos right here on YouTube where you can watch me wiring them up and you can find out how easy it is. So make sure you go check out the resources page for that, and yeah, this is it. So let's talk a little bit about the tube steel. When it comes to you, it's still in the raw form, which means it has the mill scale on it. They are all CNC cut now, so you don't have to worry about any of the cutting, drilling, tapping. All of that's been done for you. However, you still have to deal with the mill scale if you want to. I get this question all the time. Brian, do I still need to soak this in vinegar if it's already, had the seams removed and all of that? Technically, no, but in my opinion, for aesthetics and also cleanliness, because you're going to go ahead and weld all this stuff up, I do like to soak in vinegar and then hit them with a DA. You do have a couple of other options as far as acids go. You can use muriatic acid. Some people use. I don't prefer it because it's just kind of nasty stuff. But yeah, you can remove the mill scale relatively quickly with muriatic. It's within minutes. Vinegar takes, a day or two. So here's that same part after the mill scale has been removed. It's been tumbled and hit with a DA. I also like to do that to my plate steel. Gives a nice clean finish, and the parts are ready to weld up. Okay, so now that we've got our steel all prepped and ready and organized, let's talk a little bit about the tools that you're going to need to do this. Pretty simple stuff. Crescent wrenches, box end wrenches, ratchets, Allen keys. Just some standard C-clamps, different sizes, variable sizes. I like to have these around to clamp things down, and we'll discuss a little bit more about that in a little bit. But also, this might be something you don't have. This is a little digital level. You can find these in big box stores like Lowe's or Home Depot. You can also get them on Amazon. I have a tools page that you can go through and see a list of different types of tools that I use when I build and fabricate things. This is super handy for determining the difference in degrees between surfaces because it's got a magnet on it, so that's why we use this. I also like to keep some of these inexpensive red magnetic welding clamps around. These are great to have in your workshop. And also these guys, they're like an articulating clamp that you can move back and forth and use in all kinds of different situations. I get these on Amazon, and I have links on my tools page. All right, let's real quick talk about welders. I rock a Handler 190. This is a 220 edition. Really super happy with this. I got this on Amazon. This is a great middle of the road welding machine. I get a ton of questions about, what welder can I use, and can I use a cheaper welder? And yes, you can do that, okay? You can sort of game the system a little bit by using a torch, preheating your steel. Here's what I'm going to tell you, a little quick piece of advice. If you're getting into metalworking, which you probably are since you're building a Revolution or interested in it, I've never regretted buying really good or at least middle of the road welding gear. And now you have tons of options. Everlast, Harbor Freight has a really good line, titanium. You don't have to spend $1,000 on a welder to have in your workshop or your home workshop anymore. You can get a really nice welder for that. I'm building a web page on my web page that will detail out some lists of different recommendations. I will say I love shielding gas, 75-25 mix, argon to CO2, and also I use like 0.030 wire, solid wire when I do this job. So that's kind of my elevator pitch on welders. I really highly suggest though you you spend a little money and get a good welder, you won't regret it. Another tool that's handy for this project is an angle grinder with a flap disc. Super handy to have. I highly suggest you have one in your workshop. Okay, so now that we got the parts prep and the tools out of the way, let's start fabricating this. We're going to work our way up from the bottom. We're going to grab the base plate and we're going to grab the two risers. These are a little bit different. You'll notice one has a tapped hole in it like this, and that's the one that goes towards the user. So I'm going to turn that towards me. All right, so here's the axle bolt. Go ahead and thread that in from the back side, as the nut itself actually threads on towards the user. But we're really just using this axle bolt as a means to keep a reference point here. What I'm going to do now is check a measurement. I'm just going to get a measurement between these two pillars down at the bottom, and we're about 3 3/4. We're going to just make sure that we're the same 3 3/4 at the top. We're slightly off, so it's a good thing I figured that out. Grab that ruler, take another look, make sure everything's quite nested in. One of the things you're going to notice a lot during the process of this fabrication, if you haven't welded or put anything together, is that if you don't clamp things down, they're going to warp. And yeah, this plate is real thick, it's 3/8" steel, right? It will warp on you. So just remember to follow what I do in this video, because I've made so many of these. A lot of guys go weld crazy and they put a big old long bead around the base plate here, and then their base plate starts to cup in the upward direction because it's hot and it shrinks. What they didn't realize was they should have bolted this down or clamped this down before putting those welds in place. So if you follow what I'm doing in this video, which is why I highly suggest people watch me do this, your chance of success, or at least removing some headaches from the process, are a lot better. So just keep that in mind moving forward during this fabrication process. So I've got everything kind of nested all together here. I'm going to start moving it into the position where I want it, because I'm going to have to start clamping things down at this point and using some magnets to keep this in place. So let's make that happen. All right, I got some of these little guys here. These are fun to use. This is really just to kind of keep, they're not going to provide a ton of support, but they're just going to kind of keep me honest here where I am. Let's see here, we're going to do 90° here. We're going to double check our measurement, okay? We're looking for 3 3/4 at the top approximately. Doesn't have to be exact. The other thing I like to do is when I'm in the process of welding, I'll just spin this a little bit. It will probably get a little tighter on you, okay? The good news is because we're going to be tacking this together, that you'll be able to use a little hammer or something and move things back into place, okay? So don't worry about it. This machine is extremely forgiving during this process, okay? So many people have built this machine with very little, if any, fabrication experience, all right? All right, so now we got this into position. I'm going to go ahead, grab a couple of clamps. We're going to clamp down that base plate so keep it from warping. Okay, so now that we've determined that we're all plumb and square, we've got our welding magnets in place, holding everything together, we're going to put a couple of tacks into both of these pillars. We're going to do opposing tacks. So if you do one on this corner, just the kitty corner one, you're going to put one on the back side. Same over here with this pillar, you're going to do one and one here. After you've done those light tacks, we're going to double check for plumb again. We're going to make sure that our bolt spins freely, all of those things before we actually set a couple more welds. It's really important that this remains plumb somewhat. All right, so now you can see what we've done. We've done opposing tacks, one in each corner here. That's it. Made sure that the bolt didn't get locked into place. That means we're probably fairly plumb. And then we can also check for level using our little digital level. Zero that thing out, and then this number should be close to 90. And we're pretty dang... Okay. That looks pretty dang good. So yeah, and these things are super touchy. So you know, if you just tap it a little bit, you can see how it goes out of whack. Yeah, 89.9 on that side. So yeah, we're doing good. We're taking our time. Remember, you're going to hear me say this a lot throughout the build, but there's no rush here. You know, we're working towards building a machine you are going to have for your entire life, and probably your children will pass it down to their children. So just take your time building this, and it will serve you well. Okay, I'm going to put tacks in each corner now, and then I'm going to put a quick bead, 1-inch bead on either side of the faces here of this particular axes, these two here and these two here. That's all you need. Now if you decide you want to weld all the way around this base plate, I'm going to warn you that if you don't clamp this down and let this completely cool before you unclamp it, it will warp, and then your grinder will not sit level, and that is no bueno. So just remember that. Go easy on the welds. You're not building a skyscraper here. We're building a grinder. All right, so this is what your base and riser should look like once you're done fabricating it. 1-inch welds on either side of these pillars, 4 tacks in each corner, and your bolt should be free, should spin. This, honestly, is probably one of the hardest parts of the build, and you just did it. Look at you. Give yourself a hand. I'm clapping for you. Come on. Look at that. Beauty. Now, before you unclamp it, do not unclamp it until it's like, you know, it's still pretty warm at this point. Let's give it a minute. Take a breather. Go show your wife or your kids. Look what you built. Look what you've done here. And then give it a minute before you unclamp it, because we really want to ensure that this is flat. All right. Okay, so we've let this cool down. We're going to take the clamps off and get set up to weld up the chassis. So the chassis is the 2 receiver tubes. These are the 9-inch long receiver tubes. They are tapped, drilled and tapped. Each one, they're identical. And you're going to put those together so that the non-tapped portions are facing each other or kissing. You can see that there. Those are good. And then the tracking pillar, which is this guy, is going to go on top. Now, first and foremost, though, we do need to weld these together, clamp and weld these together. I like to clamp them together like this first, and then straight flat down. It's really important that these are clamped down to a surface that's flat. All right, so find something good and strong and flat. This table's made out of 1/2-inch plate. Any kind of plate that's 1/4 inch thick, anything to keep these in line. You just really want to make sure that these are flat and plumb. All right, so let's make that happen. All right, I'm going to get fancy and use my cant twist clamps. These are pretty great. If you don't own any of these, put links on my tool page for them. What I like about these is that you can slide them into these tight spots and crank down. They're actually not really used for this. I don't exactly know what they're used for. It's something to do with electrical work, but they're great. I love them. I use them a lot in my work. So I'll show them off to you. 100% not necessary though, but I really dig them. Got that clamped. I'm just going to take a straight edge. Just look. Does everything line up? Sure does. Flip it this way. Lines up. Nice and flat. It looks good. And I'm also going to double check that my tapped holes are opposing each other. So they are like that and like that. All right. And then we're going to tack this thing together and run 3 1-inch beads across each side in the middle here. No need to go weld crazy. 3 1-inch beads will do it. All right, so while we are waiting for the receiver tubes to cool down, let's fabricate up the tracking pillar here. It comes prefabricated, all cut up for you, but we have to install the spring tab, which goes back here. Now, this just holds the bottom of the spring, and I like to weld it on so that it's level with the same angle right here. So I'm going to take this, put it down in here, kind of get an eyeball on it, take a look at it. Not overcomplicating anything. I think I'm just going to go ahead and put a tack weld right here and then adjust with a hammer, because that's just kind of the way I am. Now, a lot of guys like to clamp this into place and do all of that, and most likely at the end of all of that they still need a hammer. So I'm going to go ahead and just skip all the clamping, weld it in the spot, and let's tap it into place. See how lucky we got. We're way off. Ooh. Oh, yeah. Okay, so now we are going to marry these two parts together now that they're cooled off enough to touch. Just remember that the tapped portion goes towards the user and the tracking pillar goes somewhere near the rear, top rear of this. Now, I don't measure this distance. I just kind of eyeball it. It's somewhere between 1/2 inch and 3/8. So just take that into consideration while you're putting this all together. I'm going to just kind of eyeball it. It's my favorite thing to do. I got 2 of them. I use them both. And one of the things I really want to be clear about is the plane on this tracking pillar needs to match the plane of these 2 receiver tubes. So how I do that, I use the motor plate because it's got a nice big hole in it. I can clamp down on one side and clamp down on the other and weld in between. So let's get that done. To a spot where I can actually get 2 clamps on it. Pressure right there. And make sure everything's right position, and a little pressure right here. What that's done is it's put pressure across that plane and pushed everything into position. All right, you can see we've got tacks in all 4 corners. Everything is in good alignment. Now I'm going to run a 1-inch bead across here, flip it over, and do the exact same thing over here. Looks pretty dang good. Now at this point I'm going to use DA. Hit this on all sides wherever I want, just to kind of clean things up a little bit. It's my personal preference. I do it now because it's just easier without the motor plate and the hinges in the way. You can just really clean up the steel and make it look good. All right, would you look at that? I'm really happy with that. Looks great. All right, the next step is to mount the motor plate. This is relatively easy. We give you plug welds to fill, and then we're just going to do, for cleanliness, we're just going to do a bead underneath, or 3 1-inch beads underneath. I just line this up with the first part of the radius of this tube. So if that makes sense, I just kind of line it up, and the face. So I just run my finger across here, double, triple check that all is in alignment. Clamp it straight down and put in my welds. Plug welds are really easy. Just want to take your time, go in a circle. Okay, you can see we got the 3 1-inch long beads on the bottom there and the 4 plug welds. I like to make my plug welds a little proud of the top there and then grind them back. It just gets the cleanest look for the grinder. All right, so we're making some good progress here with the motor plate on. You can do more refinement of this surface later if you want, or if you're going to paint the grinder, it doesn't really matter. All right, we're going to thread up the hinges into the risers here and pull the bolt out. Now, understand that orientation is everything during this process, and what we're trying to do is isolate the hinges from the pillars with these shims, okay? And you can screw this up pretty quick. In fact, I've done it a couple of times. So you just want to make sure that when you line all of this up, you've got one slotted hinge, that the pointy part of the hinge is up, okay? And that the slotted hinge and the tapped riser match up. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with a non-slotted hinge with the pointy side up, and you're going to thread it through the bolt by itself, and you're going to thread on a shim. Then that goes into the riser. Another shim is threaded over that bolt, and another non-slotted hinge pointed up goes through there. So you can see essentially we're isolating that riser from the hinges themselves. Then we're going to do one more non-slotted hinge pointed up, another shim, slide that all together, one more shim, you got 4 of these, up against the riser, and your slotted hinge. That's how it all orients, okay? And then you can see the reason for the slotted hinge is to allow for the locking mechanism for the grinder head itself. All right, then you're going to take your nylock. All right, big boy here. Thread this on, grab a couple of crescent wrenches, and tighten this down until these 2 outer hinges have some resistance. Okay, so you can see here, this is tight to the point where the bolt meets the end of the nylock, and that these are just locked into place. They can still move, but they're locked into place. Okay? These 2 are spinning freely because there's nothing holding them in place. Now we're going to lay this down and marry it to the chassis. Okay, so the motor plate and chassis is pointed towards you. So this is the front of the grinder, back of the grinder. And this whole thing is going to lay down on top of it. Okay? Orient your hinges so they're down towards the motor plate. And lay it into place. So what's really important is that the rear top of this hinge and this forward hinge are in alignment with the top of this little ridge here where this radius is. Okay, these 2 don't worry about. The center 2, just leave those be for now. What we're going to do is, because these are locked into place with our big axle bolt and the weight of the grinder is pushing down, we're going to tack on the very top 2 good tacks here and here, and then we'll sort these 2 middle ones out after that. Everything still looks great. Now we're going to take a couple of C-clamps, go down a little bit on those, top here, just a little bit of pressure. You don't need a lot of pressure on these, okay? And what you're trying to do is just keep them in alignment so it's good and tight, and that they're about the same distance from the front to the back here, okay? We're going to pop a tack on the top of this hinge here. Now we're going to repeat that same thing here. Just a little bit of tension, line everything up. Okay, so now we've got our tacks in the top only, and we're going to stand the machine up. And the reason why we're just going to put these tacks in the top, stand the machine up, is we want to check to make sure everything's plumb. Does it look right? Does it turn okay? You know, things like that. Because it's much easier to cut a tack weld and then redo this operation than it is to grind off a whole bunch of solid welds. So stand this thing up, and I'm just going to check it visually to see, okay, does it look right? Is it standing straight, you know? And then I'm going to turn it to feel how it turns. Feels good. I love the balance of this machine. You know, we're in the stages of fabricating it, but it wants to live in this vertical position, but it will lock into place in pretty much any position without the locking bolt. That's the beauty of the design. It was kind of an accident when I first discovered it. If you go back and watch the early videos of me doing this, you'll see that, how surprised I was that the balance was so good. Okay, now let's throw a digital level on it and just check it for 90 degrees turn. Whenever I do this, I always clamp down the grinder because it will move. Pretty close to zero already. And then we're going to set it up top and see, does that match or is it close? Yes. For those of you who can't read it, it is exact. So, and then we're going to turn the head and it should say something around 90. We're 1 degree off, and you can see we're a little low on one side. So if I tilt this up, we can adjust that and get it back to 90. For just popping it together, I'm really happy with that. We'll make a little adjustment there. So now that we have the grinder standing up, we have access to the bottom of these hinges. There's little recesses, the way that this was designed to fill in right here with weld. So you're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 welds on the bottom of each hinge, and between the hinges on the inside of the space between the pillars here, you're going to run a small bead on each one of these. Do not weld between where the risers are between the hinges. If you do that, it will lock. It won't be able to turn. So you don't want that. You don't want to have that problem. So on the inside here, I'll demonstrate. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to check for level again on this to see if those bottom welds made any difference. So, and they did. Hard to see, but just about 90 now. Okay, we're going to move on to the tracking arm. So you're going to grab that out of your kit. That's the one with all the, it's 9 3/4 long. It's got a small hole in the bottom. That lines up with this spring tab down here so that these holes match up for the spring. Let's bolt this arm up. Obviously the spring tab hole goes in the back and facing down. Set that up. Thread one washer on one side of the bolt and push that through to mount the arm. Washer on the other side, and you can finger tighten the nylock. To tighten that bolt, you'll use a 5/16 Allen head and a 9/16 wrench. And the tension on this arm, what you're looking for is to remove the play in the arm, but to allow it still to pivot. So there's not a lot of play there. Maybe one little, yeah, there we go. So those two little fingers will squeeze together and create a nice bond between those two, pivoting bond. And then we can throw the spring on. Thread this up, down into the hole there. Same with the bottom one. Just pops right in, just like that. And we're going to grab our prefabricated tracking mechanism, and it swivels, but you want it to swivel down, so just there's a radius on the one side. We're going to take that bolt, put a little Loctite on it, and thread it into the top of this hole here. So if you're standing at the grinder, this arm is to your right. You can use that same 5/16 inch wrench to tighten this down, and you don't want it super tight. You want it to still be able to swivel, so you get it kind of down in there, and just make sure that you loosen it just a little bit so that it'll still swivel. That's the point of the Loctite up there, is that will stop the bolt from moving, but this can still move. All right, you don't want a ton of play in any of that. So that looks about right, but you want it loose. Okay, so now with the tracking mechanism, the handle is an important part, so we're going to move on to the handle build. You've got a couple of choices on how you want to make this happen. This cube needs to fit into the front of the tracking arm itself, but you can see there's a weld seam in there. You can grind away that weld seam, which is what I'm going to do here today. You can file it away, use a carbide burr to get it out of there, or you can cut a little groove in here to make it fit. You're also probably going to have to modify just slightly the radius around the outside edges of this cube. Whichever way you go, it's the same end result. This thing nests down into there, and then we'll weld it into place. Okay, so now that we've got our plug here all kind of fit up into that slot, I opted for the die grinder to take out the seam, and then also use my angle grinder with a flap disc to just get that fit up. So that worked out pretty easily. Now we're going to put this into a vise, lightly cinch it down, and I'm going to fit up the handle. And remember that you want the handle oriented so that the swoop of the handle is to your left. Orientation is everything. I'm going to use a magnet just to hold it in place, and then we'll shoot a couple tacks in there, finish the weld, grind it clean. Okay, so now we're going to bolt up the secondary tracking system. You're going to grab this cool looking knob here, slide a 1/4 inch washer on it, and slide it through that hole in the handle, and then you're going to give it another washer, and then there's a 1/4 28 nylock, and that's going to get threaded on there, and then we're going to spin that all the way up till it touches the back side of the handle, and this can still turn. For this, I like to use a 7/16 ratcheting box end wrench here. Just that way it makes it a little easier. You just hold one side, crank down the other. Or you can just spin this side too, but it's a little tight. So now that can turn freely, not too freely. We're gonna bolt up this little ball end joint thing. I'm not exactly 100% sure what they call these, but this is really easy. So with this in full, when it's perpendicular, when the tracking mechanism behind here is perpendicular to the arm, you're just going to tighten this bolt spin this knob, the one you just spent all that time threading up, and you're going to line the hole up, the hole on the end of this ball end rod thing and the hole that's in the end of the tracking mechanism, and they'll align like that. Once they're aligned, slide in your 1/4 bolt, this little button head. If it doesn't thread up quite right, you know you're a little off, so just adjust it until it kind of lines up. Tighten that down. So now you can see what we've created here. It's a pivoting system. This is long time coming. We've been working on this for a few years now here, and this is the first time we sent this to production. But so it's a pivoting system, micro adjustment. So the 1/4-28 knob turns this whole system, and I think what we'll find is that you'll probably be using that as your primary, not secondary tracking, because once you dial this thing in, it's just really easy to use this knob and adjust everything. So really proud of this system. Thanks to everyone who has contributed. Okay, so the last piece of the tracking puzzle is to create the knob that we use for the pivot. So you're gonna grab this big long hex bolt, it's 3.5 inches long, slide on a 3/8 washer, thread up a nut almost to the top, and then you're gonna set your laser cut knob right on top of it and lower the bolt just so that it's just below the surface of that laser cut steel piece. We're going to lock it into a vise and throw a weld on it. And we're going to thread this in to the tracking arm. If you ever find this rattling loose, you can always add a little bit of Loctite to the threads, and that will just create enough force in those threads to kind of slow this down. That's why this nut is here, actually, is so you can lock it into place. I started 3D printing these cool handle kits, different colors and whatnot. So if you want to trick your grinder out with a 3D printed handle, you can do that. Or I've included the STL file in the plans now, so you can print your own. I think that makes it look super cool. Okay, so let's move on to the Platen Arm and the platen itself. First step is to grab the spacer and the Platen Arm, and then what you're going to do is set this spacer on top of the holes and just line everything all up, and then clamp it down to your work surface, and we're going to pop a weld onto the back side of it just to hold it into place. Before we bolt the platen up, we need to make the Platen Bracket, which is the backer plate, the 2 legs, and the 2 feet, and these all need to get welded together. It's pretty straightforward. There's probably 10 different ways to do this, but this is how I like to do it. So take the foot and the leg, position them like this on the edge of your work surface, and then slide a clamp over them, and you're going to put the clamp down over this little portion of the leg there. Slide it all together, make sure it stays tight, and then just clamp it down. And pop a little tack down in here, in there, and you're all set. All right, so we got our feet our little bracket feet all fabbed up. What we're going to do is we're going to actually bolt them to the platen in this configuration. All right, so that's the first step of this. I like to slide it right up to the edge of the D plate here. Tighten it down. Take your platen backer, take your D plate with the feet and legs bolted up, take one of your trusty dusty welding magnets and support the back side of the D plate. It'll ensure that it's right at 90 degrees. Just split the difference on the backer. You can use 2 magnets if you like. And again, this is one of those situations where I'll warn you, do not go weld crazy. If you do so, you will warp this plate, and that is no good. You don't want to warp the plate. You want this to stay as flat as possible. So just do tack, 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 and then 2 between those tacks. So 3 on each side, but do them in an opposing fashion so that you don't overheat the steel. Alright, so now we can insert our Platen Arm into the top receiver and use one of our new, really cool adjustable handles. These are new for Gen 5. Zinc, powder coated, awesome little guys. And thread that into the top hole there. These are adjustable, meaning once you tighten them down, you can lift and move where the arm sits. So if it's in your way, you get it out of your way. We've got our Platen hardware here. Going to bolt this D plate and Platen backer up. First step is to grab the 3-inch socket head 3/8/16 bolt with a washer and a split washer on it. Thread that through the D plate. Then thread that through the arm. Flat washer and a nylock. Be careful, this is going to want to tilt forward on you because it's top heavy. Now this is something new for Gen 5 as well. You get a carriage bolt that's going to slide in through the back hole, nest into there, and you also get a clamping adjustable handle. Slide a flat washer over that carriage bolt, split washer, tighten it all down. This is also adjustable. Pull it out and you can move it wherever you want. And it snaps back into place. Starting to look like a mean machine now. While we're here and thinking about it, let's thread up the head locking bolt with a flat washer. All right, let's move on to the work rest. We're going to grab all the pieces to make that happen. Get the work rest hinge, the work rest receiver, the secondary tooling arm for the work rest, the primary tooling arm for the work rest, and the actual work rest itself. So the first step is to weld these 2 pieces together. They live together just like this. The easiest way to make this happen is to set them on the very edge of your work surface. Orientation is everything. Just make sure you're paying attention to that. Butt this right up. Line it up to the top so the hole is to your far left and the slanted portion is farthest away from you. Line them up. Clamp this one down. I'll put some stitch welds, 4 of them, right between these 2 surfaces. Okay, so now that we've got the work rest hinge all fabbed up, let's insert the work rest arm into the lower receiver. We're going to bolt up the work rest hinge to that arm. We're going to use this 2 1/4 inch 3/8/16 bolt with a lock washer. Thread it through here, and here. Nylock on the other side. And on this other side, a little shorty 3/4 inch bolt with a split washer. Let's thread it in to lock it into place. And another cool adjustable handle here. Let's thread it in. Also, one more adjustable handle goes underneath the grinder and locks the work rest arm in place. Also, the last step of the work rest installation is to weld on the secondary arm here, tooling arm for that. And earlier I measured out exactly where it goes on the bottom of this plate. And I did that with the use of the plan set. I don't know what it is about this particular operation, but I must be dyslexic or something. I always screw it up. So I just print the plans, look at it, and then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place one tack in just one corner before I go crazy and weld it all down. Because, a couple things, this plate is a 1/4 inch thick, okay? And it will warp on you, even just with a good hot tack. So I'm going to go ahead and lock it down to my work surface, but also we may need to slightly adjust it in the receiver. So I want to make sure that it's square to the platen. So if I just put one tack in place, I can do that quite easily after the fact. I can manipulate it slightly and then place a secondary tack to lock it into place. So I went ahead and clamped down the work rest and the secondary tooling arm for the work rest to ensure it doesn't move when I put this tack in place. All right, so let's set the work rest into the receiver, see how everything lines up, and lock it into place. Make sure the grinder head itself is locked. Make sure the grinder is clamped down so that if you need to manipulate something, it won't move on you, and that the work rest arm is locked into place also. I'm going to grab a speed square and set it up and see where we fall. Now you can see we're not lined up. So take this and just manipulate it. A little bit. Getting better. All right, so after a little bit of twisting and turning and just banging it around, I ended up getting it really close, actually. So I'm very happy with that. It looks good. And we can finish our welds. Now, you really want to clamp this down when you finish your welds, and you don't need to go weld crazy. Just do tacks in each corner and call it a day. You don't need much more than that to hold this in place. Good solid tacks, but make sure you clamp everything in place. One of the cool features of this work rest is that if you pull the work rest arm out, turn it 90 degrees, and you take the work rest itself and flip it around 180 degrees, it pushes right up so that you can utilize the platen face in the horizontal position. All right, let's hook up a motor to this thing and then mount some wheels to it and see what it looks like. I'm not going to show you the wiring in this video because I have so many other videos here on YouTube in regards to that subject, so we're just going to bolt it up. You've got 4 bolts in your kit that are 3/8/16 1-inch button head bolts, and those are what you're going to use to mount your motor. All right, let's talk drive wheels real quick. This is a 7-inch drive wheel. You can go as low as 4-inch on this machine. I highly recommend for the speed though, you go 7. This particular one was made by my team here, and it uses a 1/8-inch Allen wrench, and there's 2 holes in this wheel, one at the bottom and one that lines up with the keyway. The one you want to find the set screw in is the one above the keyway. The other hole is just drilled there for balance. Let's get this thing mounted. right, super easy. All right, let's install the tracking wheel. That particular wheel uses a 3-inch, 1/2-inch 13 bolt. Let's slide one 1/2-inch washer over there. We're gonna use one of these little carbon spacers included in your kit. Then the wheel itself, and then one more little carbon spacer. That's it, thread it up. Take a 7/8" wrench, tighten it down just slightly, make sure it spins. Don't tighten it too tight. You're threading that into aluminum, so just a little bit there, make sure it spins. Okay, so let's talk about the top Platen wheel. This is a 2-inch aluminum wheel. We make these here at House Made. The bolt that holds it on is a 3 3/4 inch, 1/2-inch 13 bolt. You're going to slide on a 1/2-inch washer and a carbon steel spacer. You're going to thread on the wheel itself. Put another spacer through there. 2 more 1/2-inch washers. And then we can thread it through the D-plate. Gets 1 more washer and a 1/2-inch nylock. The goal with this is that when you try to move the wheel, you can't. There's no movement on the wheel. However, the wheel should spin. If you have that, you're good to go. Last but not least, we're going to work on the bottom roller. You got 2 options here. You got a hole here for a 2-inch wheel, just a standard 2-inch wheel like the Gen 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. Or you can put a 4-inch contact wheel in this bottom hole. That's what I suggest with the Gen 5, the 4-inch wheel. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt that up the same way we did the top bolt. We're going to take a 1/2-inch washer, same axle. One of these little carbon spacers. Thread up the wheel itself. Another carbon spacer. 2 washers. Thread it into that bottom hole there. And tighten it down with a nylock. All right, let's throw a belt on this thing. See if we can get it tracking. Never had a belt on this machine, just built it. Okay, so something to consider if you rock the 4-inch wheel on the bottom is that the tooling arm itself gets pushed up against the back of the motor here, or the front of the motor. So the Platen Arm seems a little too long. If you rock the 4-inch wheel, you may want to shave 1 inch or 2 off that arm. I don't personally care. I like the tension of the belt this way, so it doesn't bother me at all. So here's a few questions that I get all the time about the Revolution or any 2x72. The first one is always, how do you keep your steel looking like that? After a while, my steel starts to patina or rust. Here's a really cool tip. If you're outside of the state of California, you can buy a product called Penetrol. It's a paint additive. You can get this Lowe's, Home Depot, any big box store will have it. And it is a steel preservative. I got this tip from a bunch of rat rod buddies of mine. They all said the same thing. Penetrol, Penetrol, Penetrol. I tried it. I love it. If you don't want to clear coat your grinder and you don't want to paint it, you like that look of raw steel like I do, use Penetrol and that will keep it looking really super cool. Also, Brian, where do I find a compatible motor? Where do I find a compatible VFD? How do I wire it up? All of those questions can be answered by clicking through to my resources page. I'm going to put a link down in the description, and this applies to most 2x72s, by the way. And I also have a bunch of videos right here on YouTube describing the process, demonstrating that process, showing you the different cost options, the more expensive, less expensive, that kind of thing. So make sure you check out my resources page because there's just tons of information there. It's free, so just check that out. Also, if you're not following me on Instagram and Facebook, and right here on YouTube, make sure you do that. I am updating Facebook and Instagram almost daily, so you can follow along with every single thing I've got going on right here in my workshop. I truly appreciate all the amazing, huge support I have been given by you all. I cannot explain how much this has transformed my life. It's just, man, it's just unbelievable. I get emotional thinking about it, and honestly, man, thank you so much. I just can't even tell you how much my life has changed for the better. So again, guys, I hope to see you on the next video. My name is Brian House, and this has been House Made.